Hi guys, welcome back to the Explaining History videocast. Today I want to talk a little bit about Lenin and his view of history and how that has profound implications not just for the Russian Revolution but for the creation of the Soviet state. So, as we know, Lenin and most of the leading Bolsheviks, with the exception probably of Trotsky and Stalin, who was already in Russia, come back in April 1917 to St. Petersburg, Petrograd, I beg your pardon, and they are transported back to the capital with the help of the Germans. They get there, and there is a huge amount of ideological confusion within the party about what to do. Lenin berates Stalin for not having tried to seize power already. Stalin had been able to had been freed under the amnesty that the provisional government had agreed to because of the pressure from the Petrograd Soviet, and had returned along with Lev Kamenev to Petrograd and had become the editor of Pravda. And Stalin had thought really that there was very little point in trying to overthrow the provisional government because it would just mean the party would be crushed, and he's probably right in thinking that. Lenin, however, demands that there is a commitment to the overthrow of the provisional government, and Stalin very quickly falls in and decides that he's going to support that. However, when the Bolsheviks finally do seize power in October 1917, one of the interesting comments that Trotsky makes is that there is very little actual program, very little actual policy as to what is to be done. Just to appropriate that phrase, if you know that one, write in. And he said basically we would come to power and sign a few decrees and then shut up shop. And in essence, what he was saying is that the first task of the new revolutionary government was ultimately to dissolve the state. I doubt very much whether this view was shared by the entire Bolshevik party. But Trotsky and the left of the Bolsheviks looked upon the dissolving of the state really as the ultimate solution. You have these wonderful Soviets now. They are going to be democratic institutions, councils of workers and soldiers who will democratically decide how society is run at a very grassroots level. We're closer to kind of some notion of kind of anarcho-syndicalism here. And then, you need to do very little else after that point. Except for, of course, the country's in complete chaos and you're fighting war against Germany. So a state might be necessary just yet. The belief that the Bolsheviks had was that the revolution would spread. The revolution would spread firstly to Germany and then to the rest of Europe. And the result of that would be that you get these friendly workers' councils, proletarian nations who would not wish to wage war on Russia any longer, and instead who would be happy to cooperate, and they would be happy to send not just food, but material supplies and also technology to help Russia modernise and become the kind of modern society that hopefully the revolution was going to create. Now, the problem here is that there isn't a revolution in Germany. If we go back to Karl Marx, Marx had predicted that Germany would be the place the revolution would break out. It had the largest working class in Europe, and it had the kind of the intelligentsia to be the vanguard of the working class, to help educate them and to lead them and to finally overthrow the bourgeois regime. This doesn't happen. There is a brief uprising at the end of 1918, early 1919, which is violently crushed. Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht are murdered, and there is no chance of there ever being a communist or socialist state in Germany. Instead, you have the Weimar government. So with the extinguishing of this revolution goes an awful lot of Lenin's hopes really for a different kind of Russia. Now, the question here, and it is quite an age-old one, and I'm starting to come down with the second opinion. But there are two opinions in essence. The first is that Lenin definitely intended to create this kind of workers and Soviets the Soviet-run Russia, where there would be decision making would be devolved down to a grassroots level. Unfortunately, this was just became impossible because of the historical realities that they were confronted with. As we know, history doesn't do really what theorists think it should do. It tends to do its own thing, and theories invariably don't match, historical conditions that actually exist. The second theory is that Lenin had no intention really of creating a Soviet state, a Soviet society. Instead, he creates a Soviet state, a state that is centralized, authoritarian, violent, and able to actually bring about the bloody class war that he initiates in 1918. I'm more with the latter position. I'm less of an optimist about Lenin and his wonderful notions for the future of mankind, and suspect strongly that he was happy to sacrifice ideas of workers' democracy in favour of a centralised state. I mean, if you look at some of the outpourings that Lenin comes out with after the revolution, he has a healthy contempt for ordinary Russians, and despises Russians as Philistines and brutes, and I think he calls them rapists. In one of his letters, he is deeply suspicious, particularly of the Russian peasantry. He sees them as a kind of like a violent, barbarous lot, and quite inclined to be counter-revolutionary and to back the next Tsar that comes along. The experience of a lot of the Bolsheviks had been when they had been shipped off to internal exile and into the Tsar's prisons. The people sort of jabbing rifle butts into their backs were in essence peasants in army uniform, and so they had little time for them, and particularly Lenin. So I suspect Lenin did want to have this authoritarian society, and I suspect that the grassroots version of Russia was probably never going to materialise. Anyway, the fact that a revolution doesn't spread puts all kind of bets on hold as far as the future of Russia goes. All these revolutionary predictions are suddenly rendered irrelevant. Marx, who had always thought that the revolution would probably best not breaking out in Russia, was quite right in a way, because you have this large country which is the majority of it are peasants, an overwhelming majority, over 80%, and the vast majority of them are illiterate. So creating a modern society there is very difficult. The modern society that is created ultimately is created by Stalin under the 5-year plans, and it's not done on a kind of a grassroots Soviet level. It's done through massive state power, massive authoritarian state power, which involves not just industrialization, but again bloody class war, this time against the kulaks and the remnants of the old bourgeoisie, the former people as they're referred to. So the point I'm kind of labouring towards here is that there's a huge amount of significance in the ideas that Lenin had, and particularly Lenin's view of history. And the other aspect of this is that Lenin's view of history was, was inherently utopian, was inherently eschatological, that we're working towards an end of history, that there is going to be a utopia at the end of all of this, and all the sacrifices will be necessary. All the sacrifices in the now, i.e., all the famines of the Civil War, the executions, the bloody class terror, all these will be justified by the world we're going to create. And this idea permeates Soviet thinking, and it goes a long way to explaining some of the extraordinary cruelties and violence that we see throughout the rest of the Soviet era. Anyway, I hope that's been useful to you. If you want more on this, there are two things you can get from the Explaining History website. You can get Chris Kostov's The Communist Century. It's a brilliant ebook, a great read, and a brilliant overview of communism, really from the end of the 19th century all the way to the end of the 20th. You can get my Explaining the Russian Revolution, a student's guide. And we're just posting this week, a slightly different topic, but well worth a download, just posting this week, Julia Routledge's brilliant new The Genocidal Century, and this is something we'll talk about a little bit more in the next few video casts. Anyway, thanks for listening, and bye-bye.